We know that calorie restriction is the most documented way to extend our lifespan. We're looking for nutrients, drugs, hormones that have the same effect on our genome as does calorie restriction.
If we believe that there's a good chance that technology will become available in the next 10, 20, 30 years to dramatically extend our lives or to give us indefinite lifespans, then of course the most important thing is to stay alive long enough to benefit from that technology. And that's one of the main reasons why I'm doing calorie restriction, because it very dramatically reduces the risk of dying of the killer diseases.
And that's why caloric restriction works, is because if you run the mitochondria leaner, which is what you do when you're basically calorically restricted, okay, then they produce less free radicals. Then the free radicals don't damage the nuclear DNA. Then you don't get the double-strand break problem, or they damage it at a slower rate.
To me, caloric restriction is eating just enough food to sustain your body and making sure that you get enough vitamins and nutrients.
Amazing advance in the understanding of aging that we have now, I suppose in 1995, is really obvious. Like caloric restriction research wasn't even really started then, and all these mechanisms that Aubrey de Grey is talking about, they were barely inklings at that point in time. So there's just no arguing with the amount of advance that's going on.
It's why shouldn't it work in humans? I mean, there are species that live longer than us, so calorie restriction may allow us to push our limits a little bit further. I don't think we've reached the limits of human longevity, not at all.
Putting things in sharp perspective, University of Cambridge gerontologist Dr. Aubrey de Grey calls aging a barbaric phenomenon that shouldn't be tolerated in polite society.
The main reason why people feel that curing aging would be a bad idea, and that in other words, conversely, that aging itself is actually a good thing, is as a coping strategy. Yes, people don't think that there's any prospect of doing anything about aging and think that aging is fundamentally horrible. The only real way to put it out of one's mind is to convince oneself that it's actually not so bad after all.
But if you take a look at the population in general, I would say most people are skeptical about anti-aging research. They don't think it's possible to slow down human aging within a reasonable future. And so, if you can show that, for instance, it is possible to reverse aging in mice, or it is possible to reverse or delay, even if to a small degree, aging in old people, I think that would bring a lot of attention to the field, and it would give people the sensation that real anti-aging interventions are within their grasp.
But the rate of progress of understanding is just incredible. So it's almost like there's a Moore's law of biological understanding going on. Just like every 18 months, computer processing speed is sped up by roughly a factor of 2. It seems like in the last 10, 15 years, every couple years there's revolutionary new tools and new understanding in molecular biology. And if that happens for another 8 or 10 years, it seems pretty likely to me that we're going to come to a radical new understanding of aging.
Typically, researchers are very conservative people. Now, aging researchers or people who are involved in aging are typically a little more optimistic than most people, but but researchers are typically pretty conservative. So we posed a question: in the future, when would you think people would say aging was solved or cured or what have you? And like when would you say polio, for example, was cured? People still get polio very rarely, but and people would maybe still age, but basically when would they say aging was cured? And we threw out the extreme high and the extreme low, and we came up with an average or a mean of, I think it was 2019. And to me that was shocking, because I thought I was really far out there in my optimism. I picked 2030.
People have to understand that aging is a disease, usually when I ask the question, I ask how long would you live if you could live as long as possible in a youthful condition.
Aging, then, is a disease affecting our DNA. It is the continuous accumulation of mutations both in the nuclear and the mitochondrial genome. Hard to tell which genome is more important for aging. It would appear that the nuclear genome is more important for cancer. However, the mitochondrial genome may be just as important, or perhaps even more important, for things like diabetes or Alzheimer's disease. Right now, jury's out, but one way or another, aging is caused by accumulation of damage in the DNA.
Aging is absolutely a disease. It is the ultimate disease that kills everyone who doesn't succumb to some other disease first. Aging will be curable. Aging is the advancement, essentially, of our DNA to the point where we become debilitated, to the point where the cells no longer function. At our biomarker research laboratories, we're able to look at various genes that affect the aging process. And we've been able to show how the introduction of certain drugs and nutrients can actually positively affect those genes, so that the ones that cause us to grow old are turned off, and some of the ones that enable cells to stay healthy are turned back on. So we've been able to do, in a relatively small way at this point in time, some manipulation into the aging process using available medications and nutrients.